Number 8. Rayshawn Smith. In the early morning hours of July the 23rd of 2022, the police in Rockford, Illinois, were called to a home in the 300 block of Cole Avenue after being notified of a missing person. It was subsequently reported that 38-year-old Ashley Hardin and the other occupants of her residence were awoken by the potent smell of gasoline. The woman noticed a silver Cadillac parked outside and went to see who was in it, instructing her son to stay inside while she did so. According to the resulting criminal complaint, Hardin never returned. While investigating the property, officers reportedly found 3 milk jugs filled with gas in the front yard, some of the contents of which had been poured around the exterior of the house. Later that morning, the authorities were alerted to a dead body found behind a business in Roscoe, a village located roughly 11 miles from Rockford. The body was determined to be Hardin's, and a homicide investigation was opened after 2 live rounds were also found at the scene. The victim's ex-boyfriend, Rayshawn Smith, was immediately identified as a suspect in the case. The 46-year-old man was tracked down in Rockford, at which point the police reportedly found blood, a machete, zip ties, and the victim's medication inside his vehicle, suggesting that he'd kidnapped her before ending her life. He was booked at the Winnebago County Jail on a $2 million bond, facing charges of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, and aggravated unlawful restraint. Number 7. The kidnapping of Gladys Aranza Ramos Gurrola. At about 10 p.m. on July the 15th of 2021, a 28-year-old Mexican woman was kidnapped from her home in the Guaymas neighborhood of Ortiz by a group of unidentified armed men. Roughly 90 minutes later, the Guaymas Municipal Police and paramedics came upon Gladys Aranza Ramos Gurrola's lifeless body on the sidewalk. It was subsequently reported that prior to her abduction, Ramos Gurrola had uploaded a Facebook post pleading for the public's help in tracking down her missing husband, Brian Celaya, who disappeared back in December of 2020. Earlier on the day of her kidnapping, Ramos Gurrola had joined other members of a missing persons activist group in searching for relatives who'd vanished in Mexico's wave of recent violence. The group was reportedly looking for several clandestine crematoria, some of which still had smoke and embers when they were discovered. Ramos Gurrola was survived by an infant daughter who, within a matter of months, was left without both of her parents. Mexico has reported upwards of 90,000 missing people since 2006, when then-President Felipe Calderón expanded the nation's efforts in the war against drug cartels. Number 6. Lanny Bierroth. A frantic woman rushed inside a convenience store in Troutdale, Oregon just before midnight. On June the 17th of 2020, she reported that she'd been kidnapped by a man who'd proceeded to hold her captive inside his tractor trailer and drive her all the way from California. The victim later told investigators that the suspect, 49-year-old Lanny Bierroth, had assaulted her during her time under his control. At some point, she'd managed to escape and flee into the convenience store to alert the authorities. Subsequent reports indicated that the victim had been previously acquainted with her kidnapper, although the specific nature of their relationship wasn't disclosed. Detectives with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office were aided by a member of the Domestic Violence Enhanced Response Team in their efforts to apprehend Bierroth. He was eventually tracked down to a truck stop in Troutdale, whereupon he was taken into police custody and charged with second-degree kidnapping. Bierroth was held at the Multnomah County Detention Center on $250,000 bail. Number 5. Christina Queen and David Scott. The police in Red Bluff, California received reports that a 30-year-old Oregon man had been kidnapped on the morning of September the 5th of 2020. It subsequently emerged that the victim was being held captive by a pair of suspects who had driven him to Red Bluff for a cash exchange. Officers conducted a traffic stop on Adobe Road after receiving a description of the suspect's vehicle. The driver was identified as 45-year-old Oregon man David Scott, who sped away from the scene after an officer walked up to the driver's side window. The policeman managed to grab hold of the side of the car while standing on the running boards. Scott reportedly accelerated to speeds of up to 50 miles per hour in an attempt to knock the officer off. As they approached the highway, the officer pointed his service weapon at the motorist, who then complied with his demands to stop the vehicle. Upon coming to a halt, Scott attempted to flee on foot but was ultimately apprehended by the police. 23-year-old Christina Queen, who was in the passenger seat, was also arrested after it was determined that she'd taken part in the kidnapping as well. Investigators learned that Scott and Queen had exchanged a victim for cash shortly before the traffic stop was conducted. The man was booked at the Tehama County Jail for kidnapping, attempted murder, and resisting arrest. His bail was set at $2 million. His female accomplice faced only a kidnapping charge and was held in custody on a $50,000 bond. Number 4. Gabriel Martin. A 911 call about an attempted kidnapping was placed to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office in Florida on the morning of July the 26th of 2020. Officers were dispatched to a Tampa Bay hotel after the caller, a panicked mother, informed them that a strange man had entered her room and tried to kidnap her daughter right in front of her. The resulting police report detailed how the suspect, 24-year-old Gabriel Martin, had walked into the hotel room at about 9:40 a.m. and picked up the child, at which point the woman jumped up and wrestled her daughter away from him, and he exited without further incident. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they reportedly found Martin hiding in some bushes at a nearby business park, and he was immediately taken into custody. He was consequently charged with kidnapping, burglary of an occupied dwelling with battery, and violation of probation. The latter charge stemmed from the fact that Martin was already on probation at the time for possession of MDMA, as well as armed burglary in Manatee County. As of the case's latest developments, a trial date hadn't yet been scheduled. Number 3. Gerson Perez. Arizona police were alerted to a suspected kidnapping near 7th Avenue and Union Hills Drive in North Phoenix at about 8 a.m. on October the 6th of 2021. Investigators subsequently learned that the victim, 19-year-old Oscar Ortega, had left his girlfriend's house in the early hours of the morning but failed to return home, leading his family to believe that he'd been kidnapped. It was ultimately determined that the teen had in fact been kidnapped by a love rival. At some point, Ortega's girlfriend received a text message from him in which he indicated that he'd been kidnapped by her ex-boyfriend, Gerson Perez. Court records detailed how, after being forced into his own car at gunpoint, Ortega tried to discreetly inform his girlfriend of the situation, but 18-year-old Perez saw him on his phone and proceeded to shoot him multiple times. Later that same day, Perez's family told the police that he'd confessed to killing Ortega and given them the murder weapon after returning home with blood-stained clothing. The young man was arrested, after which he led detectives to a desert area north of Phoenix, where he'd reportedly dumped Ortega's body. Perez, who was charged with first-degree premeditated murder, kidnapping, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing a dead body, had no criminal history or history of violence prior to the deadly incident. Today's topic was requested by April K. That's Me, ZDP079, and Julie Captivated in FL. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Cleotha Abston Henderson. On September the 2nd of 2022, 38-year-old Cleotha Abston Henderson was taken into the custody of Tennessee police for allegedly kidnapping and murdering billionaire heiress Eliza Fletcher. The man's DNA had reportedly been found on a pair of sandals that detectives recovered from the abduction scene. Abston Henderson was accused of ambushing 34-year-old Fletcher, a mother of 2, while she was on an early morning jog near the University of Memphis. He forced her into a black SUV and drove her to an undisclosed location where he killed her before dumping her body outside an abandoned home in South Memphis. Upon his arrest, he faced charges of first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping. According to the Memphis Police Department, Abston Henderson's DNA was subsequently uploaded to a national database, whereupon it matched with a previously unidentified suspect in an assault case from September of 2021. The alleged victim of that particular incident publicly identified herself as Alicia Franklin. The 22-year-old claimed to have met Abston Henderson on the dating app Plenty of Fish before agreeing to meet with him in person. After entering his apartment, Franklin was abused and robbed at gunpoint. The man consequently faced an additional count of aggravated kidnapping, as well as assault in connection to Franklin's allegations. Prior to his more recent criminal exploits, Abston Henderson had served 20 years in prison for an aggravated kidnapping case in which he targeted a lawyer back in 2000. Number 1. DeMarcus Brinkley. Georgia woman Miriam Abdul-Rab was kidnapped while returning to her Atlanta residence after work in the early hours of August the 13th of 2021. According to eyewitness testimony, the 27-year-old woman had been mere moments from making it home after her shift at the Reverie VR bar in Midtown when she was suddenly ambushed by an armed assailant and forced into a dark-colored SUV. About an hour later, Atlanta police received reports of shots fired in a nearby area, and Abdul-Rab's bullet-ridden body was discovered shortly thereafter. Investigators swiftly identified 27-year-old DeMarcus Brinkley as their prime suspect in Abdul-Rab's kidnapping and murder. The man led police on a high-speed chase in the city of Griffin, which culminated with him crashing his dark blue Chevy Equinox SUV into another vehicle. He was initially apprehended on traffic-related charges, but later faced a total of 9 felony counts, including murder, kidnapping, and attempted assault. According to court documents, Brinkley had previously been imprisoned back in 2015 for abusing 2 young girls, but was released on probation in 2020. He was subsequently forced to register as a predator, but was never reportedly assigned a risk level, which is used to determine an offender's likelihood of reoffending. In the aftermath of Abdul-Rab's murder, her family proposed Merriam's Law, which would require offenders who haven't received a risk level assessment to wear ankle monitors. When explaining the importance of the proposed law, the victim's brother said, "There might be more DeMarcus Brinkleys out there. We don't want this to happen to anybody else." Thanks for watching. If your significant other was being held for a $50,000 ransom, would you pay the kidnappers or contact the police? Let us know in the comments section below.